know that it can be represented in terms of, let us say for example in this case, f of t equal to a sin omega t, where a is the amplitude. What does amplitude represent? It's you can say represents the energy content, but a square is taken as the content of energy, and omega, this case is angular frequency. In terms of the, so omega can be calculated as 2 pi into f, where f is called as circular frequency. So, of course, here we have plotted the signal as a time series signal. For example, if I had measured this, let us say many points were taken on this wave, alright, and those constituted this kind of data, where the amplitude of this we are designating as A, and omega is the angular frequency, which in terms of the cycle frequency f, it can be written as 2 pi f. Now, instead of time series representation, it is also possible to represent in a frequency domain. The same thing if I had to write it in a frequency domain, that is instead of time as your this thing, you could take either omega or f, either way is alright, either angular frequency can be taken or cyclic frequency can be taken. In that, I can show this as so this sine wave can be represented like this. It means the same thing. What it means is that this wave has the amplitude of A at a frequency of omega, alright. So, this is the frequency domain, so amplitude versus frequency can be written, whereas here I shouldn't call it as, in fact this variable is, let's suppose if I had y equal to a sin omega t, so y of t is plotted here. So y versus t is a time series signal that is plotted, whereas the corresponding frequency domain representation will be just take the amplitude of this, which is A, and show the amplitude against the particular frequency. Alright, suppose, okay, the same thing, instead of simple sine wave, if we had a sine cosine wave together, it is possible to represent this in terms of some e power I omega t, alright. I always used to get confused, what is I doing here, what is square root of minus 1. It is actually way of representing anything in a phase plane, alright. Just like we talk about vectors, vectors means it is a quantity which has direction, tensors is even little higher, maybe more than one direction associated. If you have a cyclic kind of phenomenon, dealing with vibration, wave propagation, or any such thing, any oscillatory behavior, in time domain, of course, a full cycle will represent 360 degrees or 2 pi radians or whatever. That you can represent as a complex number where, for example, the magnitude A is plotted here and the phase angle comes here. Alright. So, for example, e power A into e power I phi represents quantity of A cos phi plus I sin phi. So, whenever you have this both cosine and sine taken together, that basically represents the phase angle of phi. So, if you have a function which has both sine cosine component, that simply cos is basically 90 degrees shifted from sine, that is all. And this amplitude A therefore has to be taken as A equals square root of A square plus B square. It is if I had a complex number whose real part is small b, sorry, see, real part is small a and the complex part is b, square root of A square plus B square gives the magnitude, and the angle phi comes from tan inverse of B by A. Alright. So, in general, one can also think of the amplitude being complex. Amplitude complex implies that there is a phase angle as well. It is like saying that, once again, let me give this idea of what is complex this thing in physical term. It is something like, I have 500 rupees cash with me and a check of 1000 rupees. If I ask you how much money you have, 1000 plus 500, 1500, right? But of course, check is not something that you can directly go and give in a shop. There you can't buy vegetables and so on. You have to convert it. So, imaginary part only means that it has a potential to get converted at a later time. Alright. Again, to give an example, you see, yesterday was Bagreed, of course it comes from the moon, but you may see only the particular face of the moon. Does not mean that is the shape of moon. There is a hidden part. That hidden part is like the complex part, imaginary part. And what you see, the brighter part is a real part. Right? So in another phase, you will see that hidden part also. Just like if a pendulum is oscillating, pendulum has potential energy at some time and kinetic energy at some time. But what you see as potential energy will get converted to kinetic energy at a later instant. So in a cyclic process, therefore, what is complex can become real later. Alright. So if, for example, if something is real and plus 1, at another time it can, of the cycle, so cycle goes through the entire 360 degrees. In another time it becomes I. Some other time it is just in the opposite direction. In a wave, for example, this is, let's say, a positive fluctuation. Some other time it is negative fluctuation. And so the negative is like -1. This is like +1. And there are times when it is hidden. That will be the complex, the imaginary part. Okay. But energy that is remaining in the wave or remaining in the thing is the same. Total energy is the same. The total energy therefore becomes the square of real part plus imaginary part. So one can represent any function as an amplitude into some e power I omega t. E power I omega t is a way of combining sine and cosine together. And so you can look at it as basically what is seen in real and what is hidden in the, which will become real little later in a different phase of the whole. Just like if you see the face of the moon and only this part is seen, this part is hidden, but total shape of the moon has the whole thing, right? So you can look at it as real and imaginary. Okay. Now any periodic function which has many components, for example, I wrote a single. Suppose I have some kind of little more complicated than this. Obviously, a function like this has more than one frequency. Maybe there is one major frequency like this, over that is riding some smaller one and so on. So there could be many others. In general, any function f of t, you can expand it as a Fourier series made up of, especially in for example, a problem like this, when I said that major frequency, that can be the fundamental mode. I would call this that as a fundamental mode, and other things could also be there. So f of t, therefore, of course, for example, if average is not 0, there can even be a non-average. So you can have some function x of t can be expanded as x bar, which is the average, and an oscillatory part over, this is the average x bar, on that is oscillatory part. The oscillatory part can be expanded in a series like this, ai e power I aj, I'll call it, or can even be 1 to infinity. There can be several wavelets which are superimposed one over the other. The aj part is the amplitude of that particular. For example, if I split this, I can probably take out one major main one on this, and over that there can be other smaller ones and still smaller ones and so on. Alright. So superimposition of average plus this oscillation plus this oscillation plus this oscillation, etc., gives a total signal. Right. So that's basically the idea behind Fourier series. So x bar is the mean value, and then a1 e to the power I omega 1t, a2 e power I omega 2t, and so on, where of course I is nothing but square root of minus 1. This gives us both the sine cosine components all put together. That is, the phase difference plus the thing taken together will come in a complex form. And so, and there are several components of frequency, mean plus the main wave plus the other higher component and so on. So we can call these as, for example, this may be the fundamental mode, then this will be first mode, whatever, first higher harmonic, second higher harmonic, and so on. Alright. So like this we can have several such harmonics. If I had to write this in a, or show this instead of a time series, this is still a time series, so except t as a function of time, so which we would have obtained by taking many points, etc. We would have sampled this signal and then got many points. That could be represented in the frequency plot as omega, and then for example omega naught, omega 1 or whatever. I mean, whether you start from 0 or 1, etc., it's a matter of choice. I wrote as omega naught as a fundamental one, and or even omega 2 omega, that's better, omega 2 omega 3 omega, etc., 3 omega and so on, 4 omega, where omega is the fundamental mode. Maybe that has a very high amplitude, t omega has a smaller amplitude, and so on. Not necessary that you should go in a always in a decreasing kind of order. Something can be slightly more than this and so on. But there is a general principle that as you go towards infinity, that amplitude should go to 0. Otherwise the series will not converge. When in mathematics you would have studied about convergence of a series, as in the infinite term, no, its magnitude should be small. Otherwise, unless it converges to 0, so you this is typically the Fourier series written as, so we have written the amplitude and the frequency here. So this may be A1, the amplitude of the fundamental mode, which is very large, as you can see. This is A2, the amplitude of the second one, and so on. By the way, it is possible all these amplitudes need not be real, they can be complex. Alright. For example, it is possible that this may consist of A1 plus IB1, this may consist of A2 plus IB2, etc. What does it mean? It only means that it has that much magnitude but rotated with respect to the thing by certain phase difference. You go to the beach and look at the waves. In fact, how do the waves, if the waves are not adding to each other, the first wave comes, second wave will go until part of it is little out of phase with that. If it is completely out of phase, in fact one wave will completely annihilate another wave. You can in fact combine two light waves, one light and another light wave, and if they are exactly having opposite -1 +1 kind of this thing, they will annihilate each other, and light plus light will produce darkness. That's how the dark fringes come up in any optical measurement. So being out of phase or not exactly in phase means they will add up. Out of phase, completely out of phase means they will cancel. Partly out of phase, etc., there will be some cancellation, some addition, etc. So all this, the complex thing only means that there is little bit phase shift from one wave to the other. This wave and this wave are slightly having phase shift. So amplitude can be a complex one as well. Don't get really worried about why is amplitude complex. Only means that there is a phase difference of one wave with respect to the other, and they are not in phase. Alright, that is, in phase means if I have two waves, another wave also exactly peak to peak, valley to valley matching, that is in phase. If this wave is slightly shifted, then there is a phase difference. Alright. So when you superimpose many waves like that with some phase difference, etc., some of the amplitudes can be thought of in a complex term. The complex thing only means that there is a phase difference, rotation of angle phi or some such thing. Phi will be tan inverse B1 by A1 or tan inverse B2 by A2, etc. Alright. So every wave therefore can have some phase shift from some fixed standard this thing. So we can expand therefore any function x of t in terms of the mean value plus the higher order, different harmonics. So there can be a fundamental mode of omega, then 2 omega, 3 omega, 4 omega, etc. So in certain problems dealing with continuous random, like our turbulence data, etc., something is there, let us say. Now theoretically speaking, all frequencies may be there, 0 to infinity, all frequencies could be there. So what will happen is, it is not that you are having only some fundamental mode, it's higher harmonics, etc. This sort of thing will happen only for periodic signals. Let me give you some examples of periodic signals. For instance, a triangular wave like this. If I expand this triangular wave in terms of this, let's say this is a mean value x bar, and then there is still a periodic variation. That periodic variation will give me this kind of discrete frequencies. At discrete omega, 2 omega, 3 omega, 4 omega, etc., you will see certain amplitudes being there. You can have any kind of pulse, triangular pulse or rectangular pulse or whatever, right? Or even for that matter, some additional this thing, whatever. So it's basically something which is still periodic, but having many components, alright. So they will have this kind of, at omega, 2 omega, 3 omega, 4, only there you will have the amplitudes, in between nothing else. But if I have some random function, what will happen? At every conceivable frequency there is an amplitude. So what will happen is, if I represent this in a frequency domain, it will seem like a continuous function. For every frequency there is some amplitude, right? It's not that there is nothing, is some frequency is not there or some such thing. Almost all frequencies are there. Again, let me repeat this, as omega tends to infinity, please finally go to 0. That is necessary. That's a necessary condition for the convergence of that summation, right? So in fact, a theoretical concept of what is called white noise. White noise is supposed to have same amplitude at all frequencies. So white noise will be something like this, but strictly speaking, far away, you should go to 0, alright? So very slowly, but at infinity it must go to 0, otherwise it will not converge. Okay. So anyway, in order to convert this into, let's say, the frequency domain from the time signal to the frequency domain, something which is used is the Fourier transform. So the Fourier transform can be done as x of t into e power I omega t dt. This will give the transform. So transform, for example, if you want to call it as y or something, right? Y of omega. Of course, some people also put 1 by root 2 pi, etc. as a scaling factor, but anyway, that may or may not be there, doesn't matter. Even if you leave out, it doesn't matter really, it will only change the value a little bit. So this y of omega represents the amplitude at the frequency omega, right? So instead of representing as x as a function of t, you can represent y as a function of omega, where y is the amplitude for the frequency omega, right? So this is the forward transform where I go from the time domain to the frequency domain. represent in terms of frequency, the amplitude corresponding to frequency omega. I can also look at the reverse of this. The reverse of this will be y of omega into e power minus I omega t d omega will be x of t. So you can go from the amplitude to the time domain, or I mean the frequency domain, time domain, or okay. So this should be 0 to infinity. Okay. So like this one can think of going from time domain to frequency domain, or frequency domain to time domain. And but anyway, this is for a continuous signal, but in our measurements, do we have data in a continuous way? No, we don't. We have only discrete data. So the data we have are all some discrete points. So then the question is, with discrete data, what do we do? So you can do what is called as discrete Fourier transform, DFT. So DFT is nothing but essentially like a Fourier transform only. So here x of ti can be represented as of course, it will be for every particular time. So you understand that time is only at discrete values. So corresponding discrete time will come here. All right. So at every time at which we have measured the data, so that time we will have to put it. So corresponding to, if you want, you call it as Ti. Okay. And this is a summation over j going from, let us say, 1 to infinity. And so this is a discrete Fourier transform, because t is not a continuous variable here, it is only a discrete values we are taking it. And so there will be many frequencies will be there. Corresponding to each frequency, what is the amplitude is what we are trying to find. This discrete Fourier transform also, there are many ways of finding. There is a very efficient algorithm known as a fast Fourier transform, FFT. I am not going to go into the details of fast Fourier transform, it is not necessary also. But what is the fundamental thing that I just mentioned to you? The fast Fourier transform, what it will do, the signal that you have, it can split it into, let us say, exactly 2 halves. And then that each one into 2 halves, 2 halves, 2 halves, like that. So in multiples of 2 when you do, finally when you have only 2 components, it is very easy to write the Fourier transform for that, right? Suppose you have, for example, final value only, I have 2 values, A and B, alright. The Fourier transform of this can be written as A plus IB, A minus IB, like that. Okay. You can write in terms of this. So for a 2-term thing, series, you can write like that. Then combining, etc., you need to combine them more and more. And so, which means for multiples of 2, when the data is in multiples of 2, you can construct the algorithm in a very simple way. So starting with 2 point data, simply adding, subtracting kind of thing, the Fourier transform will be available. Then for then you have 2 of this, you can combine them, you get 4 series. Like that, then you can construct for, when there are n points, there will be n data will come, but you should not take all n of them. Why? Because how many minimum points do you require to represent any wave? At least 2 points. Right? If there is a sine wave, or any wave for that matter, any oscillation, I require at least 2 points. So which means in the expansion, suppose I took, let us say, some n points I took, I should not have n expansion here, I should only go up to n by 2. Alright. So with n point data, I should take only n by 2 harmonics, n by 2 components only I should take. More than that, you will have a problem. No, it will become meaningless if you take more than that. So, and that can be constructed in terms of, as I told you, by in a simple way of combining the thing. It can be in a very efficient, fast algorithm is available. Right? I think there are many algorithms. One of them is known as the butterfly algorithm, where just combining A plus AB, A minus AB like that, then combining them into this thing, etc. So eventually it will result in something like on a unit circle, all right, either this or that, something a little bit. Then basically you are trying to get 90 degree shift, 45 degree shift, like that you can. That's essentially what it means when you combine those series, all right. So the main requirement for the fast Fourier transform is that your number of data points must be multiple of n, all right, some 2 power something. For example, it can be 2 power 8, 2 power 16, 2 power 32, anything, 2 power whatever, all right. But that is a serious restriction sometimes. Then what do? Fortunately, if the number of n is not multiple of 2 power, then what you can do is you can add any number of zeros. It's called zero padding. So you can add any number of zeros and bring it to finally something of 2 power m, all right, with padding with zeros. So this total number of data points must be 2 power m. Any number of zeros added will not affect your this thing. So once you bring it to some 2 power m, you can apply the fast Fourier algorithm and finally get the amplitudes corresponding to different frequencies. Once you get that, how do we apply this? I mean, a lot of physics can be understood. Why are we going for such a thing? Finally, what is it that we are trying to gain? That also one should look at. Let me give you a simple example. Let's say flow over a cylinder, and let us say that suppose this cylinder at low Reynolds number is shading eddies at a fixed frequency. If I put any hot wire or something here, it may only show, let's say, a particular frequency, maybe let's say a frequency of, let's say, 50 hertz. That may be the fundamental one, all right, somewhere very close to the cylinder. If you go further away, what you will find, you may find higher harmonics. That is, what it means is this eddy has split into maybe 2 parts, etc. Occasionally we also find something combining, so a bigger vortex also is possible. So if I took the Fourier transform here, I may get only one corresponding to one frequency, that is a fundamental frequency, I will get some amplitude. If I go to another place, somewhere here, if I took the probe, I put a probe here and measure, this probably will give me not only the fundamental frequency, but it may also give a subharmonic as well as some superharmonics. So omega, I may find something at omega by 2, all right. How did that omega by 2 come about? These two combine to form this larger OD. I may also have this splitting into smaller ones and so on. So I may get omega, 2 omega, 3 omega, etc. So amplitude may be given as function. So when I see a subharmonic appearing, I know that some coalescence has taken place, all right. When I find the higher harmonics, 2 omega 3, they which were not there here, at this location very close to the cylinder, I found only a single fundamental harmonic, nothing else. That means it is shedding periodically, no, with a single frequency it is shedding here. But when I went further down and then measured, I find that not only the fundamental mode, that fundamental is still there, but there is a subharmonic which has come with at omega by 2. Superharmonics at 2 omega, 3 omega have come. That means they have come from splitting of these vortices. So like this, one can study the problem in detail, try to understand the physics of the problem a little more. So if I do FFT here and find only one harmonic, I know that it is a periodic shedding happening here, low Reynolds number periodic shedding. Further down, I know these vortices have interacted. Some coalescence has taken place. Some breakup of eddies has taken place. So superharmonics have come, subharmonics are there. So like this, any problem you can analyze in detail. Turbulence, of course, is contributed by eddies of all sizes and so on. Whether there are some breakup processes happening, whether there are some coalescence happening, etc., we can analyze in detail which mode is dominant where and why is it dominant at that place. Is it some shear layer instability which is governing this one, etc. We can study that in detail. So the spectral content of any oscillatory signal will give you a lot of physics of the problem. Alright. So FFT helps you in analyzing the contribution given by different frequencies. So a time series signal like this, you will transform into the corresponding Fourier series or discrete Fourier series or FFT, whatever you call it. FFT is a fast Fourier transform which is applicable to discrete data taken at fixed constant delta t intervals, and total number of data points have to be 2 power m. Right? And in that case, how many the number of expansion this thing that you can do will be n by 2 frequencies can be identified, and you can find out the corresponding amplitudes of those. I think with that I will stop.
Thank you, sir. I'll just continue. I'll not take much time, maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes. What I want to discuss is how to find out the instability modes in a jet. Using the spectral data, what sir has discussed, if you place a probe in a jet, what would happen? How to find out particular modes which is going to actually grow and contribute to the transition process. I'm not going through all the slides. So this is a jet. Jet actually has two modes, the instability modes. The instability in a jet is caused by two modes. One is called as the preferred mode or the natural mode instability. This natural mode instability is similar to, for instance, if you have a cylinder and you have a flow, when the Reynolds number comes to something like a 40, there is a vortex shedding happening. So similar to that, all jets has this fluttering mode. This potential core which is very close to the nozzle will actually start fluttering, meaning that they will start oscillating at a particular frequencies. These frequencies are universal and they fall in the range of 0.24 Strouhal number to 0.6. A Strouhal number is something like, it is diameter times the frequency divided by the jet velocity. So this preferred mode, we really don't know how it comes, what contributes the preferred mode, but what we can say is this preferred mode is slightly altered by the initial conditions of the jet. The second mode is the shear layer mode. Shear layer mode is commonly known to everyone because when a jet is coming out of a nozzle, there will be small vortex roll up because of the velocity gradient, the difference in the velocities from the quiescent air and the flow. So there will be a roll up of vortices. These roll up of vortices gradually goes up, and then these roll up vortices can join together, become a bigger, very large vortices. And these larger vortices are always unstable because they are bulky. They tend to become more unstable and they dissipate, and then finally they contribute mostly to the fully developed turbulence in the far field of a jet. And this shear layer momentum thickness are believed to be a function of initial momentum thickness. So instead of taking the diameter as a scaling factor as it is done in the preferred mode, we take the momentum thickness as the scaling factor here, and this also falls in the range of 0.09 to 0.18. So what we are trying to do is how these modes are affected when you put a grid on the jet. Not going to say this. So people have tried placing rings, grids and some other even actuators, and they try to study what would happen to these modes. What we are trying to do is we are trying to connect the preferred mode and the shear mode. Is the preferred mode a unique one? Does it depend on the shear mode, or the shear mode is the one which is actually causing the preferred mode, the oscillation in the central core? That's what people are trying to establish, the relationship between preferred mode and the shear mode. So in our study, what we are doing is we are having a vertical wind tunnel, So the wind tunnel has a flow straightener because the incoming air might have large scale eddies. The large scale eddies have to be broken to a smaller scale, smaller scales. So there are several measures which has been kept for that, making the scales break the eddies and make it smaller and smaller. There is a profile nozzle, as sir would have discussed about the construction of wind tunnel. The flow accelerates. So flow, what does it does? What it does is it takes the turbulence, it converts the turbulent kinetic energy in accelerating. So the turbulent kinetic energy comes down. So the turbulent intensity comes down. So the jet issued from this nozzle would be essentially a jet which is having low turbulent intensity, and the flow can be controlled using a digital mass flow meter. So in our study, these are the configurations of the jet. This is the jet which this is the setup which is available in our lab. You have a room which is covering the whole setup, so that the room, any room drought is there. If there is any, because hot wire is very sensitive to small fluctuations, small oscillations or small flow rates. So if small velocity air which is coming inside. So the whole thing is covered with a mesh, and here is the one we have mounted a perforated plate or a grid, and this is kept to steady the axis symmetry, whether the grid is changing the axis symmetry or not, whether the presence of grid would change the symmetric condition, that is the axis symmetry of the jet. We found that the presence of grid has no effect more than 2D. After 2D, it all becomes like a jet. It has the information about the grids, like scales. The grid would produce a smaller scale. There are some informations about the grid, but after 2D, it almost becomes a jet. How that happens also I'll be showing later. So first of all, when you have a jet study, we have to characterize the wind tunnel. So that characterization has been done using a right angle probe, a boundary layer probe, so that to measure, because the shear layer instability, as we said, it is depending on the initial momentum thickness. So we have to measure the initial momentum thickness. We use the same Schichtling's boundary layer theory to find out what is the boundary layer thickness, what is the momentum thickness, and the displacement thickness. So you probably get a top hat profile from a convergent nozzle. If you have a convergent nozzle issuing jet very close, something like 0.01 x by d equal to 0.0101 distance, you could see a well defined top hat profile. Even here we faced some problems regarding the wall effects, because we did not go, because it's very close to the nozzle lip. What we did is we chopped off somewhere in the middle and linearly extrapolated the value to the wall, and this is the turbulent intensity. You could see that as the Reynolds number increases, the turbulence intensity actually comes down, and this particular profile, from this profile, it's basically near the boundaries, it's like a parabolic profile. So from this parabolic profile, we can obtain what is called as the displacement thickness and the momentum thickness. So we studied how the momentum thickness and the displacement thickness of the jet at the jet exit varies with respect to the Reynolds number. You could see that it is decreasing, meaning that you know that as the Reynolds number increases, the thickness of the boundary layer becomes more thinner, right? It becomes smaller and smaller. So that is what this is also saying, it's becoming more thinner and it becomes asymptotic. So these are the uncertainties which has been estimated in our studies. And sampling, I said in the morning. So we had 5 configurations of jet. What is our idea is that the shear mode instabilities which are coming from the vertex roll up, we are trying to suppress the shear mode instability. How? Just placing a grid. So how this shear mode instability comes? Because the lip which is there, which is present, actually what it does is it the flow which is coming from the lip is actually creating a gradient, thereby actually rotating the flow which is near to the exit. So when you just close it and make it as like a wall jet, what happens is the shear mode, there is no vertex roll up happening. So only the preferred mode instability. So what we are studying is, if we suppress the shear mode instability, that is the roll up thing, what would happen to the preferred mode? If it would have come from the shear mode, preferred mode would not be present, right? If it would have come from shear mode, if it had a connection with the shear mode, since shear mode instability is totally absent, the preferred mode should not exist at all. So we created different grids okay, whether these grids have any effect on the preferred mode instability, while shear mode instability is completely absent, assuming that the shear mode instability is completely absent. So we use the same whatever I said in the morning to obtain the u component and the v component velocities, and we varied the solidity ratio as well as we varied the length and width of the grids. So in a grid you could see that this m and 2w has been varied, so that the solidity ratio is nothing but the blockage, how much portion of your jet is actually blocked. The solidity ratio is 1, then the jet is completely blocked by there is no flow out, but the solidity ratio is 0.5, then half of the initial jet area is being blocked. So by changing the solidity ratio, first 3 is change in the solidity ratio, the second one I think second one, fourth one and fifth one, they have the same solidity ratio, but they have a different mesh thickness, that is the specification, mesh specification. So you could see that what happens is when in a free jet, when you measure this is the axial decay of the velocities. When you have a jet, you place the probe in the middle and gradually traverse along the axis. So you could see that this region is the potential core region, which comes up to 6d, and then after the potential core region it starts decaying. So in a low Reynolds number jet like what we are looking at 4000, 6000 and 7000, they are very low Reynolds number jet. What happens, the vertical structures which are formed at the edges are so large that what they do is they come inside and they affect the potential core region. So because of getting a constant velocity inside the potential core, we have an oscillatory velocity which is oscillating because of the interaction between the vertical structure and the center core layer. But when you put a grid, we said that it is going to suppress the roll up vortices. So what happens, you could see that the presence of the grid has had an effect in the central core. It is almost constant, similar to a high Reynolds number jet, and then it decays. So grids essentially suppressing the roll of vertices or the shear mode instability. So there is one more effect in grid. When you put a grid in a jet, you could see there is always the profile is not, this is for a free jet. You could see that there is a top hat profile at 2D, but when you put a grid, there is a overshoot. So initially we had to probe through the data to find out why the overshoot happens. The overshoot happens because of this reason. See, what happens is you have the jet coming out at very high velocity. When you put a grid, the jets which are coming inside are having higher velocities, but the jet at the boundary layer, because of the velocity gradient, has lower velocity. So when they have here the jets with lower velocity and here the jets are having higher velocity, what happens is the lower velocity jet is it will tend to entrain inside the high velocity jet, because high velocity jets have more entrainment. So the low velocity jets will start tending to move inward, thereby increasing the mass flow rate within a circle, meaning that the streamlines are coming closer together, thereby increasing the velocity at this particular location. That is the reason when you go for a velocity profile measurement in such gridded jet, you could see that this is a free jet, but for a gridded jet you could see that there is some overshoot in the velocity. This overshoot is also is a function of what is called as the displacement thickness. So I have taken, if the displacement thickness is more, what would happen to the overshoot? So I have related the displacement thickness to the overshoot. It was found that if you have a larger displacement thickness, that is the incoming jet has a larger displacement thickness, then the overshoot was also maximum. So here for grid 4, which had a maximum overshoot, had a larger displacement thickness, which could be seen here. This is for 2 Reynolds number, and these are some jet evolution characteristics. For instance, in a free jet, how the jet evolve along the axial direction. These are the radial profiles, they are taken at different Z by D, different axial locations. You could see that you have more or less a top hat profile initially is directly, it's becoming more or less a Gaussian profile when it is evolved at Z by AD. It appears to be a Gaussian profile, but there is something called self similarity, it is not yet achieved, and there is something called isotropy which sir has discovered, that is the velocity fluctuation components are invariant with respect to the rotational transformation. That's what they call the isotropy. Even isotropy was not it was not appearing, meaning that if you have u component velocity, u component RMS velocity fluctuation, v component and w component RMS velocity fluctuation. Suppose you have taken it and you have rotated it in a random angle, and when it comes to a rest, you cannot differentiate where u component was there, v component was there, and w component was there. That's what that invariant with respect to rotational transformation talks about. So you have the radial component. So this is the axial variation of the axial variation of the URMS component, the velocity fluctuation. The velocity fluctuation seems to be very large near the grid because of the presence of grid, because grid essentially produces turbulence. So there is very large intensity, turbulent intensity near the grid. Then gradually it comes down. Then this is the place where all the streamlines merges together and start developing as an original jet. So from here onwards, it's actually a normal jet. See, there is a bump here. There is actually a very big oscillatory sort of thing. The very rise in the URMS component is there. This oscillatory URMS component is present because of the vortex coming together and interacting together, interacting with each other. But those things were not found in the grids, except grid 4. It had a larger amplitude of URMS. But other places it did not show any bump, meaning that the roll of vortices were all present. All the measurements what we probe says that the roll of vortices are not present in most of the grids, except only one grid, that is the grid number 4, which had a larger displacement thickness. So this is the V component. See, VRMS component is really very tedious in measurement. The VRMS component very close to the jet itself was very small, and it was negligibly 0 because the mean components were 0. In a free jet, if you see, there is no cross flow at the center line. So since mean flow is 0, we were not able to measure VRMS component so easily at the class. So it was nearly 0, but after 2D, 3D, when there is a cross flow coming into play, with the entrainment, more entrainment comes into play, then we were able to get the VRMS component. So the VRMS component also, it is maximum near the grid because of the fluctuations, and then it increases and then gradually so this is URMS in the radial directions. So where the shear layer, in the shear layer you could see that they are maximum, and this is the ratio, this is the isotropy, the ratio of VRMS to the URMS component. If it is equal to 1, then we could say that it is isotropic flow, but near the grid there may be very high fluctuations, the ratios are same, but they seem to, even at 16D they are trying to approach to 1, but never, the isotropy is not reached even at 16D. So you have to go something like 40D or 80D to get the isotropy in a jet. So in a radial flow also, the isotropy is achieved only in the shear layer, not in the central cohesion. So what we are trying to say is, essentially the jet which we have is a highly anisotropic. We don't know the homogeneity, but it's highly anisotropic. But in a far field, we are believing that it will reach the isotropy, and the equilibrium, what is called as the Gaussian distribution, the normal distribution, we found that the streamwise velocity fluctuation, the u component, will reach the normal distribution much quickly than the v component, because these are the essential condition for isotropy and equilibrium. So now we go for the power spectral analysis. So you could see that this is the power spectral analysis for a preferred mode. It is in the center line, jet center line. You could see that there is one particular frequency at which you have a maximum value of Strohal number. This is the preferred mode frequency. This is for a free jet. This natural mode of oscillation, I have taken a different axial location. This is the natural mode of oscillation. This is always present in any jet. Any jet, irrespective whether you have a grid or you don't have a grid. So grid essentially can modify the values of this values at which this amplitude occurs, but essentially it is always present. So you could see that for grid 1, you could see that there is a preferred mode present. Grid 2, it is there. Now going to the shear mode, in a free jet you could see that what sir was talking about, there is a primary roll up where there was a cylinder and you have one particular frequency and you have a subharmonic and a superharmonic. This is due to the vertex pairing. When two vertices are there, when they pair together and form a bigger vertices, you will have this. When they instead of pairing, when they split into several small vertices, then you have these subharmonics. So you have the first pairing, second pairing. First pairing is the place where two vertical structures join together. The second pairing is the two vertical structure which have joins with the third vertical structure. So this has been done in an inner shear layer. You could see that there is some sort of Strouhal number corresponding to 0.01. You have the first pairing and second pairing. So these are all contribute to the shear mode instability, and you could see that. So you have first vertices. The first vertices goes and merge with the second vertices. Then you have two vertices together. I think it's a two pairing I have shown, and then all this together. This large vertices will become unstable and contribute the fully developed turbulence. It's a smoke wire technique. So this is a three pair. So where you have three, so you can see that all the three are merging together. They smudge and they become a single vertex. So in the case of gridded, you could see that the shear mode is very weak. Shear mode is not at all present. That, as I said, the roll up vertices are already been suppressed. Even in grid 1, the same thing was happening. Grid 2, same. There was no presence of any roll up or anything. But in grid 4, there was a problem. The grid 4, irrespective of whether you block the edge or not block the edge, we had preferred mode as well as the shear mode. The one good thing is that both were oscillating at same frequencies. They did not have different frequency like what we said before. Shear mode has a separate frequency, preferred mode had a separate frequency. But in this case of grid 4, actually you had preferred mode with one frequency and shear mode with one. When you when you convert one in terms of diameter and theta, you see in terms of frequency, both were actually having the same frequency, meaning that the preferred mode is very dominant, but the shear mode is very weak. That too in the outermost shear layer it's weak, but in the innermost shear layer, this is the innermost shear layer, it's very dominant. So I could suggest that keeping a grid doesn't say that the shear mode can be fully suppressed. It doesn't mean that shear modes, because what we understand from now is that even when you place the grid and there are no roll up vertices, shear modes were present. So we concluded that in case of the condition where when you have a very large displacement thickness, in such cases jets, the preferred mode and the shear mode, they combine together to form something called as a unified mode. So that's what our basic conclusion. And basically the preferred mode is always present. So preferred mode will be the basic cause for shear mode. That is the next conclusion we can bring from these results. So this is the integral scale, how it increases with respect to distance, it increases. Then you have the normalized Taylor scale. These are the scale quantities. So one thing I wanted to confirm is that whether this dissipation rate in the far field, does it obey this Z by D power minus 4? This is one correlation which says whether your dissipation rate you measured is true or not. If it is true, it has to correlate with Z power minus D, and when it correlates, we can say that the flow is trying to be isotropic. So that ends my presentation. Thank you.